SGMA was the law passed in 2014, and California was one of the last states in the union to regulate groundwater at all, and groundwater pumping. And it is part of why we have such a serious overdrafting problem, where we're taking more water out than is being replaced from our groundwater. And with your indulgence, Madam Chair, I have just this. This is the headlines in the Los Angeles Times article, and it reads, despite law, that's the SGMA law that was passed 8 years ago, aquifers keep dropping. And here we are 8 years later, and we still have made very little progress in terms of actually changing the demand for water from the groundwaters, aquifers, and basins that are out there. And we have a serious problem. Now, NASA, just to give you an example of how serious the problem is, NASA scientist recently wrote in his op-ed for the LA Times that since 1961 alone, we have dropped 93 million acre feet of water, of groundwater in the Central Valley. It's simply not sustainable what we're doing. And we have to make sure that the SGMA law that everybody worked hard to pass in 2014 is an effective law that's out there. One of the problems that is causing just one of the problems that's causing this is the fact that new wells continue to be sunk in basins where there is already identified as already critically overdrafted basins, where there needs to be an effort to actually decrease the amount of pumping, and yet over 6,000 new wells went into the Central Valley overdrafted basins alone since SGMA passed. And when you go and try to scratch the surface and find out, well, who's approving those new wells and how is this consistent with SGMA, you find out that nobody has the responsibility to make sure that the new wells are consistent with the groundwater plans being created by the groundwater agencies. The counties are approving these wells with just ministerial approvals and not checking to see whether they're consistent with the groundwater agencies. And the groundwater agencies do not have the authority to say yes or no. So nobody has this responsibility. It's a fundamental flaw, and it just makes common sense that in a state that has a serious overdrafting problem, we should have somebody responsible to say yes or no when a new well is being proposed after checking to make sure it's consistent with groundwater plans. So that's what 1563 does. And 1563 is similar to the bill that was in front of this committee last year. That's 2201. That bill passed out of this committee. It passed out of every committee in the Assembly, passed off the Assembly floor, passed through every committee in the Senate, passed off the Senate floor, but with one change, and the one change made the bill so that it was not consistent with the governor's executive order. And so the governor's office asked us to hold the bill so that the governor would not be faced with a bill that was inconsistent with his executive order. This bill, we've tried to listen really hard to major stakeholders involved. We welcome their input. We know groundwater is a complicated issue, and all voices should be heard. We have changed the bill to make it, to have it focus only on critically overdrafted basins, whereas last year the bill focused on all medium, high, and critically overdrafted basins. We also changed the bill so that replacement wells are exempt, because that was a major concern raised by many people in the ag industry. Was if I have a well that goes out and I have a crop, I don't want to have to go through this process to get that. And so we have exempted that also. We're still open to more discussions as the bill moves forward, but we need people to come forward with actual solutions. And unfortunately, in spite of the fact that many well-intentioned people are working in water management and in groundwater agencies, et cetera, we also have significant and powerful forces that are much more interested in kicking the can down the road, not taking effective action, and just always saying later, later, later. it doesn't make any sense for us to continue to let this significant hole in the Sigma law stand, which is that nobody is responsible for monitoring whether the new wells are consistent with our efforts to get our basins into sustainability. With that, I appreciate that we have here and Dave Rutston on behalf of the California Association of Family Farmers. And thank you very much for being here, Mr. Rutston.
Thank you,
Sure.
Dave. 5 minutes.